Tim O'Reilly is the founder and CEO of O'Reilly Media, thought by many to be the best computer book publisher in the world. The company also publishes through online, through the O'Reilly Network, and hosts conferences on technology topics. Tim's an activist for open source, open standards, and sensible intellectual property laws. And I bet many of you have many of Tim's books on your shelves. So it's a pleasure to have Tim with us today at the largest GIS developer conference in the world to talk what Tim's doing and his initiatives. Please join me in welcoming Tim O'Reilly. Thanks, Tim.
All right, how many of you have actually ever used O'Reilly books? Fair number of you. So I'm going to talk about two related ideas today. They're both about platforms. One is the idea of the internet as a platform, and the second is the idea of government as a platform. And they're related in a curious way. First, I just want to introduce a little bit more about how I think. A lot of my work is based on this wonderful quote from science fiction writer William Gibson, who said, "The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet." There are often people who are living in the future, and the rest of the world doesn't figure it out till some years later. Good example, of course, is you guys. You've been living in the world, many of you have been living in the world of location data mapping long before everybody else realized just how important it was, and before it became a consumer phenomenon. You were already living in that future. Maybe we watch alpha geeks, people who are ahead of the curve, and then we think about that and look for trend data. It supports that. One of the big ideas I've been working on for the last decade or more is the idea that the internet is becoming an operating system. I did my first conference on this in 2002, and then when we launched the Web 2.0 conference in 2005, it was that message also, the internet as platform. There were a lot of doubters at first. For example, Bram Cohen, the founder of BitTorrent, at that first conference gave a talk kind of ridiculing the idea that the internet was becoming a platform. And yet, when we look at a smartphone application, like Google Maps on the phone, and you start thinking about what's actually happening there, the device is calling on all kinds of subsystems living in the cloud. It might be the location data, the routing, you have search, you have speech recognition, you have live traffic, you have all this imagery. None of it's living on the phone. And of course, you start to realize that this device is a peripheral to something that you could start to characterize as an operating system. And the thing that really struck me as critical is the idea that this internet operating system is not like the operating systems that we've taken for granted on devices. The subsystems that the operating system manages access to are typically data subsystems. Facebook is working to become the identity subsystem of the net, for example. And so this operating system is helping application find out about people, places, things, and it delivers services like search, routing, payment, various kinds of matching. When Google is demoing their self-driving car, it's relying on this internet operating system and vast amounts of data that Google has collected. I was fascinated when I talked to some of the engineers. People don't realize that when they did Google Street View, they not only collected all those that Wi-Fi data that gave them so much grief, but they photographed the road surface so that they have data that helps the AI in the car recognize where it is with a very, very fine degree of granularity. So data is the foundation of the future. And of course, you guys know this because for years, Esri has been at the forefront of building the data layers around the location subsystem, which is clearly one of the most important frameworks on which the applications of the future are being built. And of course, Esri has also itself become an internet platform provider, giving access to data and services in the location space over the net. So we're well on our way into this future. And what's really, really interesting is, when you look at the future, sensors are a big, big part of what's driving change. When I defined the term Web 2.0, it wasn't really about there being a new version of the web. It was really the second coming of the web after the dot-com bust. It was the same web as we'd always had. But people hearing what sounded like a version number would always ask me, what's Web 3? And I would say, well, the big change that's coming at us is when interfaces are driven by data from sensors instead of from people typing on keyboards. And we're seeing that transformation with smartphones. Clearly, there's a whole array of sensors in that phone which allow new kinds of applications with tracking. For example, take Runkeeper. People are sharing their running, but it's really becoming a sensor platform for all kinds of other health devices, so on. I mentioned the Google Smart Car. Fascinating. But we saw a great demo of this morning. I apologize for the poor quality of the photograph, but here, your little Connect interface demo. I just want to really point out, it's really wonderful to see you guys at the forefront on the interface side as well as on the building the data layer. But I want to move on, talk briefly about something I've been very excited about for the last couple of years. I started thinking about government. And there started to be a lot of interest in open government. I started a conference called the Gov 2.0 Summit. But I started asking myself, what does it really mean? And a lot of people started focusing on social media. Oh, how cool is it? The White House is on Facebook. The State Department is on Twitter. But I thought there was something wrong with that. It was an example of what I came to call vending machine government. We have this idea that government is like this big vending machine into which we put in taxes and get out services. And when we don't get the services we want, well, we shake the vending machine. And the idea that so many people seem to be working with was that Gov 2.0 was improved methods for shaking the vending machine. And it didn't seem to me that that was really the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it was to think about government as if it were a platform. And so a really great example to me is the GPS satellite system. This was something the military built for its own purposes, but they made a fateful, incredibly important decision to open it up for civilian use. And all kinds of applications have since been built, not by the government, but by the private sector that have nothing to do with the government's original aims. And of course, we've enabled a revolution as a result of that critical policy decision to do something hard, i.e. launch a bunch of very expensive, very risky satellites and build this system which gave us new capabilities as a society. And that's the business that I think government should be in. And of course, we see this also with things like weather. Weather data collected by the government, fed to the private sector, who then delivers that data to citizens. So thinking about this government as platform, it's definitely pushing the idea that government should act like a platform provider, but also that we need to leverage the power of existing platforms. And that's where using these wonderful tools that have been built by the private sector, tools like those of Esri, or Google, or Twitter, or Facebook, really gives power to government. There's an awful lot of reinvention of the wheel. And I've been spending a lot of time trying to encourage people in government to start leveraging the power of the internet platform rather than simply rebuilding things that already exist. And as part of that, I've gotten involved with a nonprofit called Code for America. We have a session this afternoon to talk about the work we're doing. I want to invite you to that. It's a little bit of a commercial here for it. I believe it's at 1 p.m. in Mesquite C. But what I really want to close with is, first of all, the idea that platforms really matter. We're in a period where we are transforming our society through technology. This is a period of tremendous change, and it's really important for us to get it right. And for us to get it right, we have to certainly follow our customers, but we also have to have an idea about what matters. And I've been urging developers not just to focus on the cheap money of the consumer internet. Oh, I'm going to have a hot startup. I'm going to be a great success. But to start thinking about the problems that we face in this world and how we can really build applications and services and systems that make a difference in people's lives. And I'm really excited by so much of what I see in your community, because there is so much that matters. I'm seeing work going on in humanitarian assistance using mapping to help find people after earthquakes, looking at things like the spread of pandemics and viral forecasting. There are all kinds of interesting new applications, public-spirited. And I love the fact that your community is thinking about all of these things. You're thinking about the internet as a platform. You're thinking about how to interact with government and the public sector. And you're thinking about working on what matters. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here to sort of cheer you on with what you're doing. I'm also here because Jack has been such a great supporter for the work that we're doing with Code for America, and I want to thank him. But I want to thank all of you for what you do, because you are a huge part of a future that is just going to be mind-blowing. Thank you very much for what you do.